And we're back like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Sunday afternoon here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Today will be the newest entry in our continuing series of guilty pleasure movies. And this is a movie we're going way, way back to the 80s, a film that is now almost 4 decades old. And it is maybe the most idiotic, over the top, preposterous comedy sci-fi movie ever made, in the realm of Men in Black, but this makes Men in Black look like not only masterpiece theater, but it makes Men in Black look like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Having said that, I must have watched this movie at least 10 times from beginning to end. It's another Gen X kind of film where HBO and Cinemax used to run it in an endless loop. There were a couple of years where you could find it on either of those channels multiple times a week because the film was rated PG. And honestly, I don't know how the film got a PG rating because there are elements that are hysterically, hilariously problematic, to say the least. The film is 1987's unconventionally titled Real Men. Now that's, even the title is kind of raising your ears and your eyebrows like, okay, what does this have to do with anything? But the movie Real Men is a scream from start to finish. It is inappropriate, outrageous, but very, very funny. And the film's 2 stars. One is a movie star and also a TV star, had a sitcom, I want to say, on ABC for many years. And the other guy is arguably the greatest sitcom actor ever. The stars are Jim Belushi and the late, great John Ritter. Jim Belushi in this film more or less plays what you would call the straight man. He is the character that John Ritter plays off of and not the other way around. When you have someone as talented in what amounts to sketch comedy as John Ritter, and the thing with John Ritter, for those who don't know the name, if you're under 35, maybe you don't know who he is. He was on a sitcom called Three's Company, which helped advance the form. He was so good on that show, it almost opened up new possibilities for what sitcoms could do, could achieve, could be, how funny they could be, and pushing the envelope, not only of good taste, but pushing the envelope in terms of what kind of humor are we even allowed to attempt. John Ritter was so good, his timing was so perfect, that even though Jim Belushi is a very talented comic actor in his own right, he's also almost underrated as a dramatic actor. Check out the movie he did with Jim Belushi and Dennis Quaid, with Tupac and Dennis Quaid, called Gang Related. It's, I think, the last film that Tupac shot before he was assassinated. But Jim Belushi is just a fantastically talented individual. In this movie, Belushi plays, I don't know if it's supposed to be FBI, CIA, but it's some version of the alphabet soup. It's a government, like a shadowy, it could be Omega sector like Arnold 7 years later in True Lies. But Jim Belushi plays a government operative whose organization has been in contact with some kind of an alien race, I guess. And unfortunately for the United States government, their point person on this side is a guy who worked with Jim Belushi, who is a dead ringer for John Ritter. His character in the movie, the character we meet played by John Ritter, his name is Bob. And he is, as one of the other characters in the film describes, he is average, maybe a little less. So this character that John Ritter plays is a bit of a sad sack. He's a family man. He is much put upon. He not only allows himself to be pushed around, but he allows his kids to be kind of monkeyed with. He is just a guy who, he's surviving in life. He's not thriving. And it appears that this is just the way that it goes. This is his lot in life. And we compare this character to Jack Tripper, the name of the guy that John Ritter played so brilliantly for so many seasons on Three's Company, opposite At the beginning, Joyce DeWitt, wonderful actress, and the late great Suzanne Summers, and then his roommate Jenny Lee Harrison and Priscilla Barnes, and you had the great Don Knotts as Mr. Furley. Damn, I can't remember the actor who played Mr. Roper. How embarrassing is that? But the actress Audra Lindley, boy, she was awesome. She was awesome. And even John Ritter, he saw her on a different TV show, and he was kind of going over the top. Oh my God, it's Audra Lindley. It's like, bro, take it easy. You're a bigger star than she was. But the thing with Ritter, he had this impeccable timing. And this movie, even though it is a feature film, you can almost break it down into what feels like envelope-pushing sitcom sequences that are designed to not only make his character of Bob uncomfortable, but we as the audience. There are a number of scenes in this film where we say, ooh, are we really going here? Yes, this film really goes there, and then it really goes there again, and then it really goes there again. So the character who Bob resembles, spoiler alert, gets bumped off in the first 10 minutes of the film. Now, he was involved in some kind of negotiations with the alien race, whoever it is. We have two choices as Earthlings, as the United States government, because we're the good guys, representing, I guess, the planet Earth. And the aliens offer us two choices. We can either take a nuclear device kind of thing that will blow up the entire planet, or we can take the good package, which means that we will just have peace, I guess. Now, the irony is, the guy who looked like John Ritter, it's a little bit like a face-off kind of thing, where you have to, one person pretends to be the other. We were actually going to take the big gun, I think is what it's called. So when John Ritter, as Bob, gets recruited by Jim Belushi, and Jim Belushi is explaining this fantastical BS to him about negotiations, and we have a choice of either the big gun or the good package, and we have to take the big gun. You know, John Ritter at this point in the movie is still a schlemiel, he's still a putz. And he says, well, if this is all real, if you're not completely full of shit, which I think you are, but if you're not, if you're telling me the truth, that there are ETs coming here and they're offering us either peace and maybe prosperity, or they're going to give us a weapon that's going to blow away the world. And Jim Belushi, with a straight face, he's so good playing it straight. He goes, yeah. He said, but we're going to take the big gun. Yeah. Okay, if it can destroy the entire planet, who are we going to use the big gun against? Jim Belushi kind of laughs. He goes, Bob, who are we going to use it against? The Russians. You just said it would destroy the planet. That would kill us too, wouldn't it? I don't know about that, Bob. That's not my department. So we go forth in this insane story where Jim Belushi comes across pretty much like Superman. He's Ethan Hunt on crack. He's even more indestructible than Ethan Hunt in a world of this film. He's like Tom Cruise's character in Night and Day, who appears to not even be as tough as Ethan Hunt, but he's about 10 times tougher. So our two intrepid heroes go through this madcap series where they survive multiple assassination attempts. And they just keep managing to get through. There but for the grace of God go these guys. Nick, that's the character Jim Belushi plays. Nick and Bob. It sounds like a setup for a joke. But there are these unbelievable supporting characters that we meet throughout the course of the film. One of whom is Jim Belushi's dad. We don't think that we get the name. But Jim Belushi's dad is transgender. And we learn this at exactly the moment that John Ritter's character learns this. And I got to be honest with you, when I was about 12 years old seeing that, I was scratching my head. I didn't understand. So from a certain point of view, this movie broadened my horizons. I feel like the scene is, I don't think that it would fly today. They wouldn't be able to do it the same way. But it shows the movie does not give a fuck. And in that regard, it's like another guilty pleasure movie that I've covered on the channel, not to pat myself on the back, from the previous year, which seems to exist only to offend. And I don't have a problem with that because there's a way to do it and then there's a way to not do it. And the movie I'm talking about is 1986's Armed and Dangerous, with two old pals, both Canadians, the late great, again, John Candy and Eugene Levy. That movie is even more offensive than Real Men, if that's possible, but I think it is. I think Armed and Dangerous is even more offensive, but its sole purpose is to try to wring as many laughs out of the audience, even though some of the laughs are at the expense of characters where you say, I don't know if this is all right. More so in Armed and Dangerous. The way that this film straddles the line, because you can have jokes in terrible taste, but they're not necessarily offensive to everyone. What this movie does, by setting John Ritter up as the butt of the joke, it works. The film sells it because it takes the character seriously. It's just that his character, for huge chunks of the movie, is presented basically as a clown. So that's one scene where you're like, whew. And then there is another moment, turnabout being fair play, with Jim Belushi as this indestructible secret agent type guy is presented also as a ladies' man. And the two guys they're in a bar. I don't remember why they're in a bar or a club. I'm not sure how it related to their mission. They have to go to a certain point. It's a little bit also, it's funny how many movies this references. It's a little bit like Starman, which is pure sci-fi. That's nothing like this. Starman has comedic moments, but it's not a comedy. But the movie Starman, Jeff Bridges as the alien that resembles Karen Allen's unfortunately deceased husband, he knows where he has to meet his friends. They have to get to a certain point by a certain time. It takes the form of a road movie, just as this does. Jim Belushi, as Nick, has to bring Bob to this point where the meeting is going to take place between us and the aliens. And we're going to decide, are we going to take the big gun and destroy the planet, most likely, or are we going to take the good package and have peace and relative prosperity? So our two guys are in a bar, in a nightclub. And Jim Belushi meets, and this is a cliche, but the movie makes it work, he meets a very, very attractive, she's wearing glasses, she's overdressed, but overdressed in a church girl sort of way. This is very, very on the nose. And he meets her, and before you know it, she's inviting him back to her place. Now, that is a fairy tale fantasy in most instances, but he's going along with it. And it turns out she's a dominatrix. She's a dominatrix, and her intention is to humiliate him. And again, I give Jim Belushi credit for allowing himself to do this at this point in his career. In the same year, he made the movie The Principal, which is a very serious film. It's like Lean On Me, but the fictionalized version of Lean On Me. It's a couple of years before that movie, where he plays a principal of a SHIT school in the worst possible area in Los Angeles. And he and Louis Gossett Jr. are basically, well, are we going to help the kids, or are we just going to not die? We're going to try not to get murdered in our own school here. But Belushi is a good sport. He allows the film to degrade and debase him. And in a crazy way, the film puts forth a notion that sometimes even, what would be a good word, milquetoast, even somebody who is much put upon, who has no confidence in themselves, who has allowed the world at large to take advantage of him repeatedly, as John Ritter's character of Bob, we are led to believe he has gone his whole life letting people put one over on him and turning the other cheek. Well, Jim Belushi's character of Nick makes a decision during a fight sequence where he puts down a lot of bad guys. You know, there's bad guys and there's worse guys, also like Night and Day with Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz. But he quells a threat. And he tells John Ritter's Bob, who has basically been knocked unconscious, and he was hit hard enough where he doesn't remember anything about the fight. Belushi pretends that it was Bob who actually saved the day and not him. And even though you could say, well, that's ridiculous, he would have some memory of this. Well, in the world of the film, he doesn't. And we go with it because Belushi is very convincing, and Ritter's character, got hit right at the beginning of the fight. Maybe he did black out. Maybe he does have a couple of minutes where he really does not remember, honestly. Belushi says, "You saved my life, Bob. I am going to be grateful no matter what happens with our mission if we die, but I will always be grateful. I cannot thank you enough. You saved us both, and you kept this mission going. Thank you." And he's very earnest in his approach. Now, John Ritter's character of Bob has had no formal training. This is not a fighter who has kind of forgotten some of the skills that he knew. What was that movie? Nobody, with Bob Odenkirk, right? Where he plays a guy who seems like a nobody, but actually is a trained killer, assassin, like the last person you would ever want to fuck with. Bob doesn't have any particular skills, but hearing this story from Nick, you beat the piss out of 4 guys whose entire life has been trying to kill people like us. You put them down. I let you down, but you saved my ass. Thank you. All of a sudden, Bob becomes a one-man wrecking crew. And it's also to the credit of John Ritter, a very kind of open-faced, very likable actor. His entire demeanor changes, and you start to believe that this guy is really, maybe he did have some kind of training. Maybe he actually is some sort of a sleeper like a Jason Bourne, where he doesn't remember anything. Or maybe it's also Viggo Mortensen's character in A History of Violence, who's pretending that he is not a lethal mobster. Don't even think about fucking with this guy. Or as William Hurt says in that movie, Joey always had good luck killing folks. Clint Eastwood in Unforgiven, William Money, I always just seem to be good at killing folks. Well, Bob, once he is told just how much of a badass he is, he assumes the role. And he takes the lead. He starts bossing around Jim Belushi's Nick. And this completely batshit insane story moves forward with these 2 guys who now appear both to be brilliantly well trained as they are knocking away whatever is in their path. And they are going to make it to their meet point. And then there's a running gag where the mousy dominatrix becomes part of the group, and she and Nick are going to start dating, and they're going to have a real relationship, and it's like all that stuff is just hysterical. Oh, and there's this one little plot beat where the 2 guys go into what is like a 7-Eleven type store. And this is before John Ritter has made his transformation into, the Terminator. Jim Belushi picks up, it looks like a Hostess cake, and he smiles, and he goes, "Happy pie?" John Ritter goes, "No." And Jim Belushi says, "This happy pie is good for 3 years. 3 years. The world could end in a week, and this thing will still be good for another 3 years." I mean, that's not the worst idea. That's the kind of food that you need if you're expecting the end of the world and you're going to go into a fallout shelter. These are not concepts that 12 and 13-year-old me, inappropriately watching this movie, would have ever put through the mental meat grinder. But that's not a bad idea. We could have nuclear war, and we could have a nuclear winter, and the survivors are down underneath the ground for 18 months. If you stocked up with nothing but happy pies, at least you would be surviving. I will survive. I will survive. So, needless to say, as our intrepid heroes reach the meeting point, we are now at an area and at a level where Jim Belushi, even if he says, "Bob, you have to ask for the big gun," John Ritter's Bob, he doesn't give a fuck. He's willing to fight him. Say, "You got all the training? You come get me. This is what we're doing. We're taking the good package. We're not going to use a planet killer on the Russians." And the movie encourages us to laugh at how stupid that is, but no offense, it isn't very far-fetched. It's just not far-fetched at all. People who think that we're supposed to be on defense, well, we'll blow them up, and if we blow ourselves up too. That's the kind of fallacy of nuclear war. The movie War Games, 4 years before this, points that out. No matter what your strategy is, You can't win a nuclear war. No matter how you deploy a planet-killing weapon, the fact that it's a planet killer should give you an idea. This is not something, forget using. You should never have possession of a planet killer. It's kind of a 1 + 1 = 2. So the movie also gives us, it's funny how many movies this references. It gives us a Superman 2 scene. So in brief, Superman 2, my single favorite superhero movie of all time. Superman 1 and Superman 2 are kind of 1 and 1A. Christopher Reeve will never be approached. I hope David Cornsweet knocks the new one out of the park. But Christopher Reeve, there's no way that anybody, and I love Henry Cavill, Reeve was the best there was. Like he's the Bret Hart of Supermans, the Bret Hart of comic book movies. The best there was, the best there is, the best there ever will be. But there's a sequence in that film where he loses his powers. And, well, he doesn't lose his powers. He gives up his powers. He gets them back just in time. And then at the end of the movie, he goes to a diner. And the reason why he goes to a diner is when he gave up his powers, he gets into a fight with this random guy who humiliates him. Now that he's got his powers back, he goes in there and tunes the guy up. And then when you're looking at him, like, how the hell did you do that? It's Christopher Reeve, top 5 best moments of his career. He just goes, oh, I've been working out. Yeah, you've been working out. Yeah, with the Kryptonian sun, you've been working out. That's great. So in the movie Real Men, there is a sequence early in the film where John Ritter's Bob is tuned up by a bunch of basically punks. He gets humiliated by a bunch of punks. They stole his daughter's bicycle. It's an embarrassing scene. He now goes back to them and he fucks them up. You don't need it, but you need it. And it's the Superman 2 moment where it's almost even more ridiculous than Superman 2 that he's actually taking time to embarrass this guy. Bro, you're Superman. Okay. But we go with it because it's such a great scene and I've been working out. Gold. So Real Men is actually streaming on 3 platforms, 2 of which are free apps. It's free on Tubi, Tubi, if you're not familiar with it, a completely free app. It's free on Pluto, which is also, you don't have to pay for. The problem is there's a billion commercials. And it is also on MGM Plus. So if you happen to get MGM Plus, maybe there aren't any commercials. It's streaming free. This is pure guilty pleasure. There are a lot of big laughs. And it's the kind of memes that you see and the shorts where it's titled something like, you owe me $1,000 if you laugh, which means you know that it's going to be some sacred cow, something that you are not supposed to laugh at, but you just can't help it because it's funny. We're only human. And as much as we would like to, as Howard Stern would say, is there such a thing as a better laugh, a wittier laugh? Or if you make people laugh, is that enough? This movie is arguing that yes, you can just try as hard as possible, just make the audience laugh. And I defy anyone, as much as there are very dated elements in this film, you will not be able to stop giggling. There are huge stretches of this film where you will be just giggling away and you might turn red and you might be embarrassed that you're laughing, but you will laugh. And the story has a good message. It does have a good message of self-reliance, confidence, and also the idea of life is not always about what happens to you, but how you approach conflict. Do you expect to succeed or do you know that you're doomed to fail? The character of Bob has a 3-dimensional arc in this story. And you don't expect a 3-dimensional arc in a film as utterly ridiculous as this, but we get it. Real Men from 1987, a comedy science fiction film with a good message, starring Jim Belushi and John Ritter. Boy, John Ritter was something. Wasn't very old when he died. I think he's been gone a couple of decades, or I don't remember when he passed. He had that 7 Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter, and similar to the late Red Fox, he passed. I don't know if he was on set, but he passed while that show was a hit. It's really unfortunate, but we have roles like this. He didn't have a great film career, but he has this really terrific role, and he was in a film called Hero at Large. And Blake Edwards' Skin Deep, which was 2 years after this, highly recommended, a very funny movie. Real Men, starring Jim Belushi and John Ritter, the newest entry in our continuing series of guilty pleasure movies. This has been episode 406 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Sunday afternoon with me here in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Until then, peace.